this anxiety. The first is we can see how growing up in a particular environment predisposes your mind to anxiety. The second element that we're going to dig into is how using substances can sometimes exacerbate our anxiety or even sort of create particular situations in our mind that feel like anxiety, but may actually have a different diagnostic kind of perspective. And then the last thing about today's video is sort of how do we deal with anxiety and sort of overcoming some of the hesitations that people have around getting treatment. So I really thought that Chuck did a fantastic job of like touching on. I really loved this discussion about anxiety because we talk about anxiety like it's monolithic. Right? Like, I have anxiety, like you have anxiety. We all have anxiety. What is the treatment for anxiety? Like, you know, in Western medicine, it's like you have anxiety, period. And we heard from Chuck, he's like, my doctor gives me this medicine and like, cause I have anxiety. And so it like our system of medicine, we treat anxiety, we don't treat people. But what I really love about today's talk is it's an exploration of where anxiety starts, how your upbringing brings you to anxiety, how substances can actually exacerbate things or make things worse. And then also how a lot of things that look like anxiety may be a little bit more diagnostically nuanced. And then finally about like how getting treatment is important, but what are the things that can get in the way of you wanting treatment? And so all that kind of stuff is fantastic. So I think this is really what like explorations of anxiety look like, where I want you guys to understand that it's not just about a clinical diagnosis and a medication. It's about a whole spectrum of like origins of how you got to here, thinking about these other influences that have compounded your anxiety over time and how to approach it in a truly multidisciplinary manner, venting that negative energy, using meditation, taking medication, seeking a therapist, overcoming your fears that you kind of internally face, having to face those fears, deal with those fears, etc. Really fantastic.
How's it going?
Good, man. How are you?
I can hear you for a second. Oh, I'm good. I appreciate you having me on. Thank you very much for that.
Dude, I appreciate you coming on. Everyone is always so grateful that like we're having them on. And I don't think you guys realize like we wouldn't be anywhere without you.
I think it's more so, I'm sure there's a lot of people that could, be sitting here instead of me right now. You know what I mean? So still got to be grateful.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. It's very positive of you. And so is your name C-Do?
Yeah, it's just like an abbreviation of my real name, which is Charles Dolan,
Okay.
But yeah, you can call me Chuck, Charles, C-Do. It's all good.
Okay. Chuck?
Chuck, yep, that works.
Monosyllable. And so Chuck, is there something in particular that you were thinking we could talk about today, or maybe something that we could help you with?
I mean, I guess I could kind of, break down what I'm going through. I don't really
Please.
like talk about this, so I'm not really sure like what I should be talking about or what you're interested in or what you can even do to help me. But basically I've been dealing with like anxiety for a long time, and I would say it's gotten progressively worse. It started to like hit me really bad when my wife was pregnant with her first kid. I don't know if it was related. I feel like subconsciously, I guess it would have to be related if that's like when it started getting bad. But basically, I'm like, it's kind of weird. Like, I'm actually like afraid to have anxiety. Like, I think my biggest fear is like having a panic attack, because like one time I had like a panic attack that lasted like what I would say was like an hour or something, and I felt like I wasn't in control of my body. Like, I felt like reality became like fake. You know what I mean? It's kind of hard to explain. So I feel like that's like my biggest fear. And like, I feel like I'm constantly like overthinking, and I just have like, constant like chatter in my head. Like, okay, am I going to have a panic attack? Okay. I'm feeling nervous. Like the slightest thing, like, wow, I feel like a tingle, like in my body, like, oh, my heart is like beating faster. Like, anything just kind of starts like those thoughts that just don't ever stop, if that makes sense. Like, it just, it's most of the time, I would say it's like an all day thing, but, I kind of had like this this thing on my stream a few days ago, which, kind of started, me reaching out and trying to make like small improvements. And I would say for the most part, it's been better, like, significantly better. And generally it is better. I think I just had a string of like really bad days. But, even then, like when I'm feeling normal, like my brain is just so weird. I'll be like, wow, I haven't thought about anxiety in a while. Oh, now I'm going to start thinking about it. It's like I notice myself feeling good, and then I start to question, yeah, I'm feeling good.
Your anxiety is like, nuh-uh, you're not allowed to do that.
It doesn't stop. It doesn't stop.
Yeah. Wow, dude, it sounds heavy, bro.
I mean, I don't want to, I guess, oversell it. Like I feel like, I'm probably doing better than some other people that are dealing with this, because I do my daily things, and, I travel, I go out and stuff like that. But it's definitely, sometimes I feel like it's harder to enjoy like living in the moment, and it kind of makes me sad sometimes. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely, man. How long have you been kind of carrying this around? Like, how long has this anxiety been with you?
I mean, like I said, I've had it at a young age. I would probably, I don't know how young is young, but like maybe like my mid-teenage years, like 16 or something, is like when I, experienced my first panic attack. And then it's probably been really pretty rough for like 3-ish years now. Like, my son's almost 3, and it was like while we were pregnant with him. So I would say that's like when it started to get not nearly as manageable. Like I actually had to get like medicated for it, because I was waking up every single day shaking. Like my whole day would be me like literally shaking, and I couldn't stop it. And I couldn't eat, and I was struggling really bad. And I tried, really hard to not do that. But like the medication helped me so much that I was like, this just had to be,
Good.
The answer, because I couldn't live the way I was living.
Absolutely, man. So I'm glad that you got mental health treatment. Because it certainly sounds to me like this is like a clinical case of anxiety. And I'm also kind of noticing. Do you mind if I ask you a couple of questions just about what kind of treatment you've tried and a little bit of your treatment history?
Sure. Yeah, go ahead. Feel free to ask me anything.
Yeah. So let me take a step back and explain why I'm asking. So usually we steer clear of clinical topics on stream, because this really isn't supposed to be medical advice. Mm-hmm. The reason I want to ask you a little bit about your treatment history is because in my experience as a psychiatrist, there are some things that have to do with clinical anxiety. And there are actually non-clinical solutions that we can learn around anxiety as well. And I basically want to parse out how much of the clinical stuff has been done so that I know how to approach the non-clinical stuff, if that makes sense. So I've got a couple of like basic questions for you, okay? You don't have to answer anything because this is your personal medical history. It's going to be like super high level stuff. So it sounds like you're taking medication now and that the medication helps.
Yeah.
Okay. And it sounds like you started medication around the time that your wife was pregnant.
Yeah.
Okay. Have you tried psychotherapy or something besides medication?
No.
Okay. So that's basically all the questions I need to ask, because that'll sort of help me understand like what to include and what not to include, and kind of how we go from here.
Sure.
Any particular reason you haven't tried psychotherapy?
Honestly, I would say like until as of like recently, I kind of feel like my thought process was like, if I just kind of deal with this and like try and forget about it, it'll go away. Like I didn't really like talking about it. Like this conversation actually is like kind of like making me nervous a little bit, but I'm happy to be here. And it's like, I also didn't really like want to go to a like, I guess a psychologist. Is that because like, I don't know. I guess it just made me a little bit nervous, like it.
Sure. So let's start because you said that you have trouble being present focused, right? So let's start in the present. So I noticed that when we started the conversation, you were doing well. And then especially when I asked you a little bit about your treatment history, you've started crossing your arms. I'm noticing you're feeling more nervous. So tell me how you feel right now.
I mean, I guess I feel a little bit nervous. I'm okay. I'll
But it's
definitely make it through the conversation. But
yeah, absolutely. So I want to just point out that language because it's so interesting, right? It's like you play WoW, right?
Mhm. Yes.
So what I'm hearing is like you've got a couple of dots on you and your HP it's fucking ticking down. But you're like, I'll make it, like I'm still gonna wipe, like, we're still gonna win the raid, like we're running out of mana, like this boat is sinking, but we're gonna make it to shore.
Mhm.
That's what I'm hearing from you. Which is like it's a god awful way to go through life.
For sure. Yeah, I don't disagree.
So I think that our goal here is not to make it through to some, it's like, let's figure out how we can, cleanse those dots,
Mhm.
right? Because what I want to help you with is like to not have to live this way. It's not about overcoming your anxiety to survive. Like that's just not any way to live life. Right. And I can see that you've learned how to do that really well. Actually, really awesome and noble. Like I'm sure that your kid is grateful. Your family is grateful that you've learned how to manage that anxiety. But it's also like I can see it kind of clawing away at you and you're sort of like keeping it at bay while you're trying to live your life. And you're sort of protecting your loved ones from the impact of that anxiety. Does that make sense to you or resonate at all?
Yeah, it does.
How do you feel right now?
I feel, the same. Like,
Okay. Did that do anything to your nervousness as you were listening to that?
Not necessarily. I think
Okay.
it's kind of like, I think it like kind of plateaus. You know what I mean?
Okay. So
For the most part.
Tell me what do you mean by nervousness? What do you experience right now?
I guess like I just kind of like, I feel like weird in my own skin. Does that make sense? Like, I guess. And then, maybe that's kind of it. I don't know. Like, I guess I like try and just do things like I like fiddle my hands and, move around a little bit. I don't know.
And this may sound, so I'm going to, see your weird statement and raise you in a weirder statement. Do you think that sometimes when you fiddle and stuff, you're trying to find your way back into your own skin?
I'm not sure. I feel like it's a way for me to just like do something and I guess like just keep my hands moving or, you know what I mean? Just like maybe like a nervous tick or something, like tapping your leg or, like playing with something in your hands, just to move around, I guess.
Okay. Are you having particular thoughts right now?
No, I feel like for the most part, unless like my mind is like running really crazy, when I'm like distracted, I'm like generally okay. And like I said, since like those few days ago, I started like trying to eat better and trying to exercise a little bit. I'm not doing anything crazy. And, some people recommended like 15 minutes of, deep breaths before and after you wake up. And I've been doing that. And I kind of felt like there was like immediate results. Like I felt like my thought process slowed down quite a bit. Not like in a, I can't like function way, but like the racing thoughts like definitely almost went away immediately.
Okay.
Like I had a string of, excuse me, really bad days, and where I just kind of felt like my whole day, I just couldn't like enjoy anything except the fact that like you're not going to have a panic attack, you're not going to, you're going to be okay. Like that, just
So that's what the racing thoughts are. They're kind of
sometimes that's definitely I would say like the start of it. Sometimes it could get worse than that. I've always been like, no, go ahead.
Yeah. What percentage of your anxiety is about being anxious?
A lot. I would say I told you, like my first panic attack was like super like scary to me, like to a traumatizing matter. Like I was, I thought I was going to die and I was afraid that, I would like potentially like I could lose my mind and never like be brought back to sanity. And, I wouldn't be able to control myself. And, there would be times where I'm driving, like, what if I have a panic attack right now? Do I just die? Like, going on flights and stuff. Like, what if I have a panic attack on the plane? Like, what the hell's going to happen? Like, I can't get off. Like,
Chuck, have you ever heard of the term agoraphobia?
I'm recently started reading Panic to Power, and I think it's been used in there a few times.
Do you have they explained in the book, or do you remember in the book how they describe agoraphobia? So I want to explain this just to educate people, okay? So, this is something that you should consider talking to your provider about, but just to explain to you kind of how this works. So first of all, what you're describing is like completely normal in the sense that some people, for whatever reason, and we can get to that in a second, are kind of like when they create their character, they get the panic or anxiety trait. And so sometimes what happens is people who have panic attacks will sometimes become agoraphobic. And what agoraphobic means is fear of going outside. So they stay home, and sometimes in really severe cases, they'll be, stuck in their home for years at a time. Sounds like you've already, I don't think that's going to happen to you. So, because if it was going to happen, it would have already happened. So I think you kind of dodged that bullet. But I think the reason that I bring up agoraphobia right now is because I think it illustrates a lot of what you're going through. So the reason that people become agoraphobic is out of a fear of having a panic attack and being in an uncontrolled environment when they have a panic attack. So it's not like they literally are afraid of the sun or the sky or other people. Literally, if you talk to people who are agoraphobic, and these are people who it's very hard for them to leave the house, what they tell you is, what if I have a panic attack in those kinds of places? And they're so afraid of losing control in the outside, outside of their home, that they end up, that fear becomes so powerful that they never leave. And there's also sort of like this agoraphobia light, which is like when people are able to actually leave the home, but whenever they leave the home, their mind is constantly scanning for methods of escape. Like, what if I have a panic attack while I'm on a plane? What would I do? What if I have a panic attack if I go to a party? How am I going to escape from that situation if I start to lose control? Do you have those kinds of thoughts?
I would say it's not as bad as you're describing it. The plane one is definitely, a fear of mine for sure. I'm not afraid to fly. I'm not afraid the plane is going to crash.
Yep.
It's literally just I'm afraid I'm going to get uncomfortable on the plane. And, I've definitely been in that situation before where I started to feel panic attack coming on. And I've gotten this even recently. And although it scares the living crap out of me, I just tell myself, shut up and take deep breaths, and no one will even notice. You're going to be 100% fine. And that's what happens. If I feel one coming on, I don't know how to explain it, hits me, and I'm in shock for a second. I'm just and then I feel a little bit tingly. You know what I mean? I feel a little bit tingly, and then I'm okay. That's just it. And it's weird because I feel I said about driving and stuff, sometimes I'll think about what happens and I'm just doesn't matter. You got to live your life, if it happens, worst case scenario, pull over.
Yep.
You'll be 100% fine. And it's never happened while driving before. And
so I'm noticing that there's a dialogue in your head.
Oh, 100%. I talk to myself all the time. Hope that doesn't make me crazy.
Nope. Doesn't. It makes you sane.
Okay.
So, Chuck, I'm going to lay out a couple of options, okay? Actually, let me make one or two observations. So, I think today could be really good in terms of we can discuss and I can explain. How are you feeling, by the way?
I'm all right. I would say just all right. I could say I'm good, but obviously, I am a little nervous. I was a little nervous about coming on here in general. Like I said, this isn't something I've done ever. I don't talk about this really, and I just kind of broke down, a few days ago. And I'll talk to my wife and stuff. She obviously knows, but this is obviously something I've never done publicly before.
Sounds like you haven't really done it much privately either.
No, yeah, I don't.
What keeps you from talking about it?
I would honestly say, I felt my thought process was, if I ignored it, it'll go away. And the more I talk about it, the more real it is,
Sure.
I literally don't like talking about it. People would come in my chat and say, what are you going on Dr.K for? And I don't even want to answer that question. even though like I'm the one who did it publicly. Like,
and how does it feel when they ask you that question?
I don't even like saying the word anxiety or reading it or anything like it, because I feel like once I see it, then I like it doesn't stop in my brain. You know what I mean? Like I could be completely fine and then I see it and then I'm like, oh shoot, here we go. Like I just got to think about it until it goes away.
Yeah. So I know this sounds kind of like this is going to be a weird question. What do you think about thinking that if you ignore it, it'll go away?
That's kind of like what I guess like what my philosophy was originally, right? Like,
yeah. Why do you think you had that philosophy?
I guess because in my younger years, for the most part, it worked. Does that make sense?
Excellent.
Yeah.
Good. So I'm really happy to hear you say that, Chuck, because a lot of people who are listening may think that that's a bad philosophy to have. Like if you ignore problems, they don't go away. But this is the first thing I want you to understand. If your mind is doing something, there's a damn good reason for it.
Mm-hmm.
And so oddly enough, I do think that ignoring it will make it go away is actually an oddly effective strategy that sort of worked for you. Because let's remember, if we really tunnel down to it, I know it sounds really weird, but if we really tunnel down into it, what happens if you open the door to your anxiety?
It kind of like pours out, like it just...
Absolutely, right? So like ignoring it is your way of keeping the door closed. Because one thing that we can listen to, and if you really like, if you just kind of think about it for a second, the anxiety gets out of your control so easily. So it's like a bucking bronco that gets like let loose in your house. And then it's just like jumping all over this place, smashing furniture. And so really the only thing that you've learned, or not the only, the most effective thing that you have learned so far is just to keep it outside of the house. Mm-hmm. And this is where I don't think that ignoring it is really fair. What I'd really say is like not letting it into your mind. Because what I'm hearing from you is that once it gets into your mind, there's racing thoughts, there's thought loops, one thought leads to another, leads to another, leads to another. And then you like start having this dialogue with yourself. And then that kind of like fuels your anxiety even further. And sometimes you win, but I'd also venture that sometimes when you argue with yourself, the anxiety is kind of like a punching bag where the harder you hit it, the harder it swings back. Mm-hmm. And so ignoring it is actually, it's not really like ignoring it per se. When this is where ignoring really means not letting it into your mind. Because if we think about what does the word ignore mean, it means the active process of preventing thoughts about something in your mind. Mm-hmm. Right? So I think ignoring it is a fantastic tool in your arsenal of dealing with anxiety. Second thing I want to point out, so then there's this dialogue component where sometimes you fight with your anxiety, and sometimes you win, and sometimes you lose. But the problem with fighting with your anxiety is that oftentimes it fuels the tension in your mind, right? And if we think about it, like the low anxiety states are actually states of low energy in the mind. Would you agree with that statement, or does that statement make sense with you? For you?
Not exactly in terms of making sense.
Okay. So like when you're calm, your mind is not doing a whole lot. And when you're anxious, your mind is doing a ton. Mm-hmm. And I would venture that when you fight against your anxiety, the total amount of activity in the mind is increasing. Mm-hmm. And I would also venture that when the total amount of activity in the mind increases, you get closer to anxiety.
Okay.
And if you really think about it, when you succeed in fighting your anxiety and you stop and you take deep breaths, what happens to the energy in your mind?
I guess it would go down.
Absolutely. Right? So the more energy in your mind, it's almost like there's like this portal that is spawning anxious thoughts. And the more energy you pump into the mind, the more anxious thoughts it spawns. And sometimes you actually like attack the portal and you try to like, overcome it with willpower. That can actually make your anxiety worse. And what actually works is stopping to fight. It's just like zoning out.
Yeah,
right? Like you're
I can definitely agree with that. Yeah.
And so if we think about it, zoning out is also like ignoring. Like ignoring is not zoning in the first place. There's no zoning in, there's no aggro. And sometimes now what you've learned is like, okay, like I don't want to zone in. And now that like we're aggroed, like let's just zone out. Because sometimes you'll sit there and you'll like, you get aggro, you start tanking, you start spamming all your buttons and all your cooldowns. And sometimes you win and sometimes you wipe. But either way, like even while you're fighting that battle, life continues going on. Time to feed your kid and put your kid to bed. And here you are fucking spamming your cooldowns, trying to fight that anxiety like in your head. No one else is aware, but you're like getting wiped in a raid. And so there's this really interesting like principle of like energy and anxiety where actually what we want to do is unplug our mind. And so this is where breathing exercises can help. That's just kind of a point that I wanted to make. I'm going to toss out a couple of different things and then you tell me what you want to talk about. Okay. Next thing that I want to point out is that, your problem is not the anxiety. It is also your response to the anxiety. So the anxiety is not something that you control. But then you do something like half of your panic is around the fear of future anxiety. It's not even like the core anxiety. So our mind does this thing where sometimes, we have adaptations to circumstances. And then sometimes the adaptations actually end up hurting us more. Like just to give you an example, if I'm depressed and I start drinking because it makes the feelings of depression go away, then that sort of works, but like now I've created a whole new problem. So in your case, I think there are two ways you can move forward. One is you can move forward with the root of your anxiety. And the second is you can move forward with the response to your anxiety. Does that make sense?
Are you going to like kind of go in detail in like, go ahead.
Yeah. So like there's the original panic attack, which you sort of can't control. And then there is your fear. There's almost like the PTSD from the panic attack. And what I'm saying is that if we really look at it, those are like two separate issues. And so what I mean is that like you can tackle both of those and your anxiety can get better by preventing the original panic attack or working through that original panic attack, but also by like relearning how to deal with that original panic attack. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. And then kind of the last thing, or two more things that we can kind of touch on. And I know it's kind of scattered what I'm kind of pointing out. I'm going to use the shotgun approach and then you let me know like what you're interested in. Okay. So is that we can get to the origins. So I can ask you like, what was going on in your teenage years? What was your upbringing like? What was your first panic attack like? What happened when your wife got pregnant? And we can you kind of say subconsciously there has to be a connection. You're right, by the way. And so we can kind of dig into that and maybe help you see that connection if you want to. A lot of people do that kind of stuff. Like those are the kinds of conversations that a lot of people benefit from on stream, but we don't have to do that. And then the last thing that we can talk about is like a little bit about the physiology of anxiety. And so almost like a neuroscience perspective, like you're using these phrases like, I don't feel like I'm in my own skin. And like what is actually happening in your body? What is happening in your brain to create these kinds of sensations of like depersonalization, where you feel like you're not in reality anymore. And then that begs the question, what is reality and what is you? So there's sort of like this physiologic neuroscience, like weirdly spiritual, like let's talk about the nature of the universe and existence, man. So there's like kind of that tack too. And I think these are all like useful things to talk about. It's kind of like what you are interested in.
Let's see here. I kind of feel like we should go with the first one, and it's gonna sound really weird, but I feel like that is the one that is gonna like make me like the most anxious to talk about, because I like have only talked about it like once or twice. Like number one, if you wanted to know more about like my childhood, I'm more than happy to tell you. But like the manner and like how I had a panic attack and stuff, like it kind of still scares me to this day. So maybe like getting that out and like having you touch up on it would maybe make me feel better. I don't know. Okay,
good. So beautiful. So now, Chuck, we're going to be scientists. Okay. We're going to party up. We're going to be scientists. So I want you to pay attention. Notice your fear and wanting to talk about it. Notice that you're pushing yourself in spite of your fear. And what I want you to keep track of, because you're the only one that can do this, is notice what happens to your various thoughts and emotions as we talk about it. So do things get better? Do they get worse? Both are possibilities. Do they feel the same? Do some things get better and some things feel relieving? Like all kinds of stuff, okay? So let's just see if it does help. Because maybe if it does help, maybe we can talk a little bit about seeing a therapist more long term. Okay?
Sure.
So tell me about your childhood, bro.
Where should I start?
I don't know. What was growing up like?
It's all right, I guess. I would. My parents eventually ended up getting divorced. So I would say that it was not a very good marriage. It was actually like pretty openly bad. Like I feel like they would actually fight quite a bit. My dad was like a little like OCD crazy.
What does that mean?
So like if something wasn't like completely straight or not done his way, like it was a problem. Like it was like maybe like military status. Like, you walk in the house, shoes off at the door. If you leave your bedroom, it has to be perfect. We weren't allowed to sit on our beds unless it was bedtime. So we would literally watch TV in our rooms on the floor. If we were to leave our house, we would have to have bedroom checks to like make sure it was straight enough in order for us to be able to leave. There would be times where like we would eat dinner, and if I wasn't eating fast enough, like if I didn't like finish my food by a certain time, I would have to go to bed. Like my dad would like put a timer on. Before I say all this, I should probably say I actually have a good relationship with my dad now. Like I know that, when he was younger, he was kind of like, I don't want to say crazy, but he was his methods probably weren't the best for parenting.
Sure.
But we're definitely past that.
Okay.
But I would say, my sister and I probably favored my mom. Like my dad would go away for work and we would always be like pretty happy when he was gone. We would stay up late and, yeah.
Do you remember what it felt like when you were eating your food?
I didn't like it. I was like, I actually had this thing for a long time where I wouldn't eat the last bite of my food. Like it was like, I don't know why, because I feel like I think one time I like overate and threw up, but like, I don't know. For a long time, I wouldn't eat the last bite of my food because I felt like, maybe I would throw up, or maybe since I wasn't being forced to, I didn't have to. I don't know, but I do remember that was like a part of like my mindset for a while.
Okay. So, can I ask you a couple more questions?
Yeah, for sure.
I'm going to need a second to try to find the right question. Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
What was it like growing up with a dad like that?
I mean, for me, it was normal, I guess. Like I didn't really think much of it at the time. I definitely spent like a lot of time at friends' houses. Like I would almost say like a few of my friends' parents like would have like literally adopted me or considered me their kid at the time. Like I would be there all the time. I had like a bunch of different friends where I would be there nonstop, stay over nonstop. Almost every single weekend, I probably never stayed home.
Why?
Not even because like I didn't want to be home, but because I enjoyed like, I would say my other friends' houses like way more, like more freedom.
What did you enjoy about being there?
I mean, probably spending time with my friends, more freedom in general. It just felt like we got to do a lot more. Like my house was like always really strict when my dad was home. And I wouldn't say it was very fun.
Yeah.
And I actually remember one time specifically, this is probably like a little off topic and completely random, but my mom came home with like a video game for computers called Mech Wars. And my dad made her go back to the store and take it back and specifically said, computers are not meant for video games. And I still give him hell for that comment to this day, because I'm like, that's how I make my living now. But, so sometimes I would go to my friends' houses and play computer games.
And do you remember how you felt when your dad made your mom do that?
It's probably pretty sad. I was like, damn, that game looks super awesome. And it's funny because I would play video games on that computer all the time, but it was just like pinball and stuff like that. And they just came with the computer, and I don't think he knew.
Yeah. So it sounds like there were, and what did they fight about?
Everything. I can't remember specific arguments, but they just did not get along very well.
Do
They
you
got divorced
remember?
when I was in 8th grade.
Okay. When you were 13?
Yeah, just about, yeah.
When was your first panic attack?
Like 16.
Okay.
But I will say, and like this is maybe not relevant, but like I experienced my first panic attack when I was smoking weed. So
It's actually very relevant.
okay.
We can talk about that too. So I'm trying to figure out how to goose step around this, but I'm just going to come out. So it sounds like, you grew up in a household that breeds anxious kids.
Potentially. I mean, my mom dealt with pretty bad anxiety. My sister deals with anxiety, depression, and I deal with anxiety. So it's possibly passed down as well. But
yeah, so sure, there's a hereditary component. So there's a really interesting study, kind of bizarre. So they take kids who are anxious and parents who are anxious. And what they actually do is give anxiety medication to the parents.
Mm-hmm.
And then the kid's anxiety goes down.
Interesting.
Gets almost the same therapeutic benefit as medicating the kid. And it's really weird, but like anxiety is sort of, kids are very attuned to their parents.
Mm-hmm.
And so like when the parent is anxious, like imagine you're 6 years old and like your mom is like freaking out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the kid is going to be like, what's wrong? Right. I'm freaking out. I don't understand what's going on, but I can tell it's bad. It's a really fascinating study. But what I'm kind of really noticing is that like if we think about anxiety, what I think about of anxiety is like anticipation of danger. Mm-hmm. So if you really think about, I know it sounds kind of like a weird question, but why do human beings get anxious? Like but we have parts of our brain that make us anxious. And why does our brain do that? And it's because anxiety is actually a protective mechanism. Yeah. So our brain's capacity to anticipate danger actually protects us. And what I'm actually noticing is that your house was sort of a dangerous place. Like if you sit on the bed, like I mean, this may be so built into you, but like, I can't imagine what it's like to live in a house where like, if you sit in your bed, like what would your dad do?
It wouldn't like hurt us, but we'd probably get yelled at. And
right?
to go up on that even more, like I know everything that I dealt with as a kid was obviously very strange, and I'm like pretty close with my wife and her dad, and like we kind of like, we talk about it and laugh about it, and like when we're at family dinners, like I tell my dad the crazy stuff he did, and he's like, that never happened. We laugh about it.